The desert sun hammered down on Whiskeyjack Range, turning the gravel into shards of light. A line of Marine snipers knelt at the firing line, sweat darkening their fatigues, scopes pressed to eyes that blinked in frustration. Steel silhouettes sat at 1,850 yards, shimmering in the heat like mirages. Shot after shot cracked the air, miss after miss. Behind them, Gunnery Sergeant Miller barked corrections, his voice sharp with irritation. "You're letting the wind beat you. Marines, stop trusting the damn computers and read the air." His words rang hollow, because Miller himself had been watching rounds drift wide all morning. At the edge of the range stood a figure the younger Marines barely noticed at first. An old man in a sun-bleached cap, sleeves rolled to elbows, his hands scarred by years of hard use. Slung casually over his shoulder was a battered rifle case. When Miller's temper finally boiled over, he wheeled on the stranger. "Hey, civilian, this is a restricted line. You're trespassing." The old man didn't flinch. He set the rifle case down and unzipped it. What he drew out wasn't a gleaming M2010 or a Barrett M107. It was a relic, an M40A3 Woodstock, worn smooth by time. Paint scuffed where hands had gripped it through countless patrols. The Marines laughed under their breath. Miller sneered. "That museum piece belongs in a display case. Not on my range." But the stranger's eyes were steady, pale gray and sharp as glass. He ignored the glares, lowered himself onto the mat, and let the rifle settle across his pack. The action of chambering a round sounded almost ceremonial. One of the younger Marines whispered, "Who even is this guy?" No one answered. But the desert itself seemed to pause as Elias Forge Mercer retired, Chief Warrant Officer 5. United States Marine Corps settled in behind the rifle. He breathed once, half out, and squeezed. The crack split the air. For 2.5 seconds, nothing but silence. Then clang. The distant steel rang out. Dead center. The entire firing line went still. Mercer rolled back to his feet with deliberate calm, as though he'd simply confirmed something he already knew. His voice carried easily in the stunned quiet. "You're staring at numbers. Start listening to the wind." Every Marine felt the ground shift beneath them. They weren't just staring at a trespasser anymore. They were staring at a ghost who had just humiliated their technology with a rifle older than most of them had ever touched. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold military stories. The laughter was gone now. The silence after Mercer's shot pressed heavier than the heat. Gunnery Sergeant Miller's jaw worked, rage rising to cover disbelief. "You got lucky, old man. One hit doesn't mean a thing." Mercer didn't argue. He simply shifted, chambered another round, and spoke as if lecturing a class. "Luck, no. You're fighting the mirage instead of reading it. Look there." He gestured toward the horizon. "See that shimmer rolling right to left above the rocks at 1,000 yards? That's thermal drift, but the grass at 1,500, barely moving wind folding back on itself. If you chase the flag at the target, you'll always be late. Find the window. Shoot through it." His words cut deeper than any reprimand. Young Marines leaned forward, suddenly realizing they were hearing something their instruments couldn't teach. Miller couldn't stand it. He stepped closer, voice sharp. "You think you know this better than me? I've been training Marines for 15 years. Mercer's gaze lifted slowly, meeting his. There was no arrogance in his face, only a quiet sadness. 15 years of pressing buttons doesn't mean you've learned to listen. Miller's hand shot out, gripping Mercer's shoulder, ready to shove him back from the line. But before he could act, the faint wail of sirens cut through the air. Every head turned. Dust plumes rose on the long dirt road from base. A convoy roared toward them, 2 black Humvees and a military police cruiser, lights flashing, tires tearing up gravel. The vehicles screeched to a halt. Doors flew open before the wheels stopped rolling. Out stepped Colonel Halvorsen, uniform immaculate, face carved from stone. Beside him, the base sergeant major radiated quiet menace. The line of snipers snapped to attention. Miller froze, hand still on Mercer's shoulder, color draining from his face. Colonel Halvorsen's eyes locked on Mercer. He didn't even glance at Miller. He strode forward, boots crunching, and stopped in front of the old man. Miller's hand recoiled as if burned. Then the impossible happened. Colonel Halvorsen snapped the sharpest salute the Marines had ever seen, his back ramrod straight, his voice booming across the silent range. Retired Chief Warrant Officer 5 Elias Mercer. Sir, on behalf of this command, I apologize for the disrespect you've endured today. A stunned gasp rippled through the ranks. Miller stood paralyzed, his authority shattered. The colonel dropped his salute only after Mercer gave the smallest nod. Halvorsen turned to the Marines, voice cold as steel. You've failed this test all morning because you believe gadgets make you marksmen. And in your arrogance, your leader disrespected a man whose boots he isn't worthy to polish. This man wrote the doctrine on extreme crosswind shooting you've been fumbling to apply. In Vietnam, they didn't have a name for our snipers, but the enemy had a name for him. They called him the Ghost of the Wind. The words hung heavy, every young face pale with awe. They were no longer looking at a trespasser or a relic. They were looking at the man whose single shot had just rewritten everything they thought they knew about war, wind, and what it meant to be a Marine. The convoy's dust was still settling when Colonel Halvorsen lowered his salute. Every Marine on the line stared at Elias Forge Mercer like they were seeing a ghost step out of history. Gunnery Sergeant Miller fought to recover control. Sir, with respect, this man isn't cleared to instruct. He's a civilian, and my Marines answer to me. Halvorsen's reply was cold steel. Your Marines answer to results, and today, Gunny, your results are failure. Miller flushed, his pride cracking. He snapped. Then let him prove it again. One shot doesn't make a legend. Mercer didn't rise to the bait. He only walked back to the firing mat, unhurried, M40A3 in hand. Dust puffed under each step. The rifle looked ancient compared to the sleek M2010s on the line, but in his hands it felt alive. He spoke without looking up. Mirage plays tricks. Don't chase the shimmer, read the rhythm beneath it. Wind folds like water if you watch long enough. The Marines leaned forward, soaking in every word. Miller folded his arms. Scoffing, Mercer lay prone, settled the stock into his shoulder, and drew a long, measured breath. Time seemed to stretch thin over the range. The trigger broke. 2 heartbeats. 3. Clang. Dead center. Again. Cheers erupted. Young Marines who had sweated and cursed all morning suddenly shouted his name, pumping fists like they'd witnessed magic. Halvorsen let it roll for a moment, then raised his hand. Silence fell. His eyes drilled into Miller. You asked for proof. You just got it, and you embarrassed yourself doing it. Miller's jaw clenched, but he couldn't speak. His authority had collapsed in front of his own men. Mercer rose slowly, dusting his hands, voice even. The wind doesn't lie. You just stop listening. The colonel's verdict followed like artillery. Starting tomorrow, remedial training. Instructor retired CWO5 Elias Mercer. The Marines traded stunned looks. Miller's face burned crimson. Mercer slung the rifle and gave a single nod. I'll teach, but understand next lesson won't be this forgiving. The next morning, the range was different. The young Marines weren't swaggering now. They were silent, focused, waiting. Miller lingered at the edge, arms crossed, stripped of command but unable to leave. Mercer stood at the line, cap pulled low, eyes scanning the horizon. He carried no tablet, no wind meter, no gadget, only the M40A3 and a voice that cut through the desert air. "You've been trained to trust machines." "Fine, machines measure. But people listen. Today, you're going to learn to listen." He pointed toward the far silhouettes. Mirage shimmered like heat-drenched water. "Tell me what you see," one Marine muttered. "Targets dancing left to right." "No," Mercer corrected. "Mirage is the lie. Look lower, the grass at 1,000. Barely moving. Look higher, the hawk circling. See how it stalls on the westward glide. That's the truth." He crouched, scooping dust, letting it trickle through his fingers. The grains twisted in 2 different directions before falling. 2 layers. Shoot between them. Find the window. He let a private take the shot. The Marine exhaled. Squeezed. The round cracked and the steel rang. First hit of the week. The private's eyes went wide, mouth open. Mercer's voice stayed calm. Not luck. Listening. The line buzzed, each Marine desperate for their turn. One by one, they adjusted, recalibrated not with gadgets, but with their senses. Hits multiplied. Steel ringing across the valley like a choir of revelation. Miller finally snapped. "Parlor tricks, he's feeding you riddles." He grabbed a Barrett from the rack, dropped to prone, and barked, "Watch a real Marine work." He fired. The massive .50 cal thundered, but the round skidded wide, kicking dirt yards off target. Laughter rippled down the line, low but unmistakable. Miller's face twisted. He swung the Barrett back to safe, but Mercer's voice stopped him cold. "You aimed with anger, not air. That's why you missed. Wind doesn't care about your pride." "Gunny." Miller's hands trembled on the weapon. For the first time, the unshakable gunnery sergeant looked small. Colonel Halverson stepped forward, voice like a blade. "Enough. From this day forward, these Marines answer to Chief Warrant Officer Mercer. Gunny Miller, you'll be first on the line tomorrow." Miller's eyes widened, fury colliding with dread. The colonel's command left no room for defiance. The Marines stared, silent, caught between fear and anticipation. Mercer slung the M40A3, his gaze sweeping the line. "Tomorrow," he said, voice low but carrying. "You'll learn the hardest lesson, and it won't be as forgiving." The words settled into every chest like a storm warning. The next chapter of Whiskeyjack Range was about to begin, and none of them would leave unchanged. Dawn spilled across Whiskeyjack Range, turning the horizon into molten copper. The Marines were already in position, rifles braced, eyes sharp. Yesterday they had found hits for the first time. Today, Mercer promised something harder. He stood before them with the M40A3, the sun cutting lines across his weathered face. Yesterday, you listened to the ground and sky. Today, you'll listen to yourselves. The hardest enemy isn't the wind, it's doubt. He gestured toward the silhouettes at 1850 yards. Mirage shimmered violently. Crosswinds shifted without warning. The targets seemed unreachable. One by one, the Marines dropped prone, each steadied. Read the signs Mercer had taught them: grass, bending in 2 directions, birds stalling mid-glide, dust swirling in spirals. One by one, their rounds cracked across the range. Clang, clang, clang. The steel rang like a hymn. The line that once reeked of frustration now pulsed with confidence. Mercer watched, arms crossed, pride hidden behind discipline. Then he pointed at Miller. "You're up." The gunny stiffened. Yesterday's humiliation still hung heavy, but now every eye was on him. He lay down, Barrett steady against his shoulder. For a moment, the old arrogance flickered, then faded. His gaze lifted. Scanning the desert the way Mercer had shown, he whispered the wind aloud, almost to himself. Adjusted. Fired. Clang. Silence. Then the Marines erupted, not mocking this time, cheering. Miller lowered the Barrett slowly, exhaling like a man unclenching years of pride. His eyes flicked toward Mercer, not with defiance, but something closer to respect. Colonel Halvorsen stepped forward, voice carrying across the line. This is what training was meant to be. Not gadgets against ghosts, skill against the impossible, and discipline against yourself. Mercer slung the M40A3. His voice was low, steady. Machines measure, people listen, and if you learn to listen to the wind, to each other, you'll survive battles no device can predict. The words settled deep. The Marines would carry them far beyond Whiskeyjack. As the sun climbed higher, Mercer walked off the range, leaving echoes of steel and silence behind. To the men, he was no longer just a relic with an old rifle. He was the wind itself, unseen, undeniable, unforgettable.